Before the cannons thundered, before the walls cracked, before the last emperor vanished into legend, there was a city that believed itself eternal. It stood between continents, between seas, between worlds. Its domes caught the first light of dawn, and its markets breathed in a dozen languages before noon. For 1,000 years it had endured siege after siege, empire after empire, as if protected by history itself. And yet, what is a city? Stone and mortar? Faith and memory? Or simply the fragile agreement that tomorrow will look like yesterday? In the spring of 1453, that agreement was about to be broken. The city would fall, but something within it would refuse to. Something would remain unconquered. Long before the final siege, life within the great city followed a rhythm as old as its walls. Fishermen cast their nets into the narrow strait where two continents almost touched. Monks moved through shadowed corridors thick with incense. Merchants bargained beneath vaulted arcades where silk from the east brushed against wool from the west. The cities, walls, massive, layered, and battle-scarred, were more than defences. They were a promise. Built nearly 1,000 years earlier, they withstood invaders who arrived with ladders, with catapults, with fleets that darkened the horizon. Each time, the city endured. Each time, it told itself the same story. We are chosen. We are protected. We are the last light of a dying empire inside those walls. The old world persisted. Candles flickered before mosaics of gold and lapis. The emperor, draped in fading splendor, presided over ceremonies that echoed Rome itself. In the great cathedral at the city's heart, a dome seemed to float above the faithful like a fragment of heaven suspended in air. Beneath it, voices rose in chant, and for a moment, the crumbling empire felt infinite again. But beyond the walls, the world had changed. New powers were rising. New armies were organizing. New technologies were reshaping the mathematics of war. The old assurances, the sacred walls, the divine favor, the memory of past victories, were becoming relics. The city had survived centuries by believing it could not fall. That belief was about to meet gunpowder. To the east and north, a young sultan watched the city with relentless focus. He had inherited not just a throne, but a mission. The city that divided his lands in two was more than an obstacle. It was a symbol. As long as it stood, it was a reminder that his dominion was incomplete. He was young, ambitious, and patient. He studied the walls not as monuments, but as problems to be solved. The breaking point came not from prophecy, but from innovation. Cannons, massive, iron-bellied monsters, were dragged across muddy fields and positioned before the ancient walls. Their creators had calculated trajectories with unsettling precision. The defenders, who had trusted in stone and tradition, now faced an enemy that wielded mathematics and metallurgy as weapons. When the first cannon fired, the sound rolled across the sea like a crack in the sky. For weeks, the bombardment continued. Stones that had defied centuries began to fracture. The defenders patched breaches by night and prayed by day. Food grew scarce. Sleep became a memory. Inside the city, daily life narrowed to survival. Bakers rationed flour. Children learned to distinguish the whistle of incoming fire from the silence before impact. The old world, with its rituals and certainties, was shrinking to a single question: how much longer? The siege was not just military, it was psychological. The walls were symbols. As they crumbled, so did belief. And yet, within the city's heart, the great dome still stood. The engine of change was not simply the cannon. It was the convergence of ambition, technology, and timing. The old empire had been eroded by centuries of internal strife and external pressure. Trade routes had shifted. Allies had grown distant. Wealth had thinned. Meanwhile, the rising power outside the walls was dynamic, disciplined, and unified. Its army was organized not merely around feudal loyalty, but around centralized authority. Its leadership understood logistics, supply lines, morale. This was not just a clash of armies. It was a confrontation between eras. The defenders fought with valor that would be remembered in song. The last emperor himself is said to have removed his imperial regalia and joined the final defense at the breached walls. In that moment, hierarchy dissolved. There was no emperor and subject, only men facing the end of a world. Before dawn on the final day, waves of attackers surged forward. The defenders, exhausted and outnumbered, met them in desperate combat. When a small gate was left unsecured, or perhaps betrayed, the balance tipped. The city that had believed itself eternal was entered by force. What followed was the brutal arithmetic of conquest. For 3 days, the city was given over to its conquerors. Homes were looted. Churches were stripped. Families were torn apart. Those who survived hid in cellars or sought sanctuary in the great cathedral, believing its sanctity might shield them. Inside that vast space, beneath the soaring dome, thousands gathered, praying, trembling, waiting. When the doors were broken open, the illusion of protection dissolved. The human cost of conquest is never abstract. It is a mother clutching a child as footsteps echo down a corridor. It is a craftsman watching years of labor burn in a single afternoon. It is a scholar who knows that the library he tended to will not survive the week. One young apprentice, perhaps no older than 15, might have stood in the marketplace that morning, watching as banners were torn down and replaced. He had grown up believing his city was the center of the world. By evening, he was the subject of a new empire. For the conquerors, too, there was transformation. Victory was intoxicating, but it demanded responsibility. To hold the city required more than force. It required vision. And here, history turned again. The young Sultan did not raise the city. He claimed it. He entered the great cathedral and ordered that it be preserved. Its mosaics would be covered, its purpose transformed. But its structure would endure. The dome that had symbolized one civilization would now serve another. The conquered city would become a new capital. Streets were repopulated. Artisans were summoned. Scholars were invited. The city's markets reopened under new laws. Minarets rose beside the ancient dome, slender and defiant against the sky. The unconquered tower was not merely stone. It was the idea that architecture can outlive ideology. The great cathedral, now a mosque, stood as a bridge between eras. Beneath its vast ceiling, prayers changed language. But the human impulse toward the divine remained. The building absorbed transformation without surrendering its grandeur. The new world that emerged was neither wholly old nor entirely new. It was layered. Under the new rulers, the city regained vitality. Trade flourished once more. It became a crossroads of faiths and cultures, where Christians, Muslims, and Jews navigated a complex web of coexistence and hierarchy. Some benefited enormously: merchants who adapted, officials who pledged loyalty. Others lived as second-class subjects, paying special taxes. Navigating restrictions, power had shifted, but inequality remained. Time itself felt different. The calendar of empire changed. The symbols on coins changed. The language of administration changed. Yet the sea still glittered at sunset. The call to prayer now echoed where bells once rang. But the sound still marked the passage of hours. The global ripple was immense. With the city under new control, traditional trade routes between Europe and Asia became more precarious. European powers, hungry for spices and wealth, began seeking alternatives. Ships pushed further into the Atlantic. Navigators gambled on uncharted waters. In a strange twist of consequence, the fall of one city accelerated the age of exploration. New continents would be encountered. Entire civilizations across the ocean would soon feel the shockwaves of that spring in 1453. Empires rose and fell. The city, renamed, reshaped, remained a prize coveted by all who understood its geography. But conquest never silences resistance entirely. Within the conquered population, memory persisted. Songs and stories preserved the image of the lost city. In monasteries far away, chronicles were written during its fall. The idea of reclaiming it would inspire campaigns, alliances, and fantasies for centuries. Within the new empire, too, there were tensions. Governing a city of such symbolic weight required balance. Religious scholars debated. Administrators negotiated. The city was both a jewel and a burden. Philosophers and historians would later argue that the fall marked the end of the medieval world, that with those shattered walls, an entire era collapsed. Yet history does not end. It transforms. Centuries passed. The empire that had conquered the city expanded across 3 continents. Its architecture redefined skylines. Its legal system structured daily life for millions. The city at its heart thrived, weathered plagues and fires, welcomed travelers who marveled at its layered beauty. And then, in time, that empire too began to weaken. Nationalism surged. Wars erupted. The old imperial order fractured. Once again, the city found itself at the center of upheaval. Once again, banners changed. In the 20th century, the great cathedral-turned-mosque became a museum, a deliberate gesture towards secular identity and shared heritage. Visitors from across the globe walked beneath the dome, gazing at Christian mosaics and Islamic calligraphy coexisting in fragile harmony. The tower had survived emperors and sultans. It had survived conquest and conversion. It had absorbed layers of meaning without collapsing under them. Yet even this status would not remain fixed. In our own century, its designation shifted again, reigniting debates about identity, memory, and power. The building does not speak, but its stones remember. They remember the chants of Byzantine liturgy and the thunder of cannons. They remember the first Friday prayer after conquest, and the quiet footsteps of tourists. Centuries later, they remember fear, ambition, devotion, and pride. The conquered city has worn many names. It has belonged to many rulers. Its people have spoken many languages. But at its heart, the unconquered tower stands as a testament to continuity within rupture. What does it mean for a structure to survive when everything around it changes? Perhaps survival is not about resisting transformation, but enduring through it. The fall of the city did not erase it. It redefined it. It forced it into a new narrative, one that connected Rome to the Ottoman world, the medieval to the early modern, Europe to Asia. We live today in a world shaped by those transformations. Global trade routes, shifting borders, cultural intersections. They all carry echoes of that moment when cannons roared against ancient stone. We inherit the consequences. When we walk through modern streets built atop older foundations. When we debate identity and belonging. When we argue over monuments and memory. We are participating in the same struggle between conquest and continuity. The city teaches us that power is transient. Empires declare themselves eternal, until they are not. Walls seem impregnable, until they crack. But human creativity, adaptation, and belief persist. The unconquered tower is not a symbol of invincibility. It is a symbol of endurance. It reminds us that destruction and creation often arrive together. That progress can be born from catastrophe. That suffering and renewal are intertwined in the long arc of history. On quiet mornings, when the light filters through its windows and settles across, marble worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, the building seems almost weightless, as if time itself pauses inside. Outside, the city pulses with modern life, cars, ferries, voices carried on the wind. Few who pass by can fully grasp how many worlds have risen and fallen here. Yet they walk in the shadow of them all. The conquered city was never truly erased. It was absorbed, transformed, reborn. Its tower was never unconquered by force, but it was unconquered by time. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson. We imagine history as a sequence of victories and defeats, but more often, it is a story of survival through change, of identities layered rather than replaced, of memory refusing to vanish. The cannons fell silent centuries ago. The banners have changed more times than anyone can count. The empire that stormed the walls is gone. The empire that built them is gone. The tower remains. And as long as it stands, it whispers a truth we are still learning to understand. History doesn't disappear, it is reborn.